Evelyn and Jonathan descended from the creaking elevator and stepped hesitantly into the corridor of the Ravenwood Hotel's vintage wing. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and old leather as a distant thunderclap echoed through the empty hall. Flickering wall sconces cast long shadows across the patterned wallpaper, flowers turning from soft gold to deep amber in the wavering light. Outside, rain glittered against the windows like diamonds scattered across the glass. Nearly every floorboard groaned beneath their weight, as if the hotel itself were stirring awake to greet them. The door to room 13 stood at the end of the hallway. Its nameplate was tarnished brass, the number looking to be hand-painted years ago. Evelyn hesitated, her pulse quickening. A cold draft drifted from beneath the door, carrying a faint scent of perfume and a tang of something metallic. A rumble of thunder shook the hall and, when it faded, only the distant wail of wind remained, along with the hotel's low, quiet breathing. The attendant at reception had given them a reassuring smile and a heavy key, but now Evelyn wondered what he had meant. She steeled herself and lifted the latch. The door groaned on its hinges as she pushed it open and stepped inside. Inside, the room was a world preserved in dust and dim light. Deep shadows pooled beneath the heavy velvet drapes, drawn close against the storm. A large antique four-poster bed dominated the space, its once white linens were now yellowed with age. Evelyn could see her own reflection in the old gilded mirror, but behind her, the shadows seemed thicker, darker. A grandfather clock stood in one corner, its brass pendulum hanging still. The air smelled of mildew and old paper. Jonathan set down their battered trunk by the bed and ran a hand along the carved wooden headboard. "Quite a charming place, isn't it?" he said, though the forced cheer in his voice only added to the hush. A single candle flickered on the bedside table, casting dancing light over his features. Evelyn managed to smile, though her stomach felt tight. "Yes, very antique," she replied softly, lowering her suitcase onto the floor. By late evening, after they had freshened up from the journey, only the soft sigh of rain and the storm's distant rumble filled the room. Evelyn drew back the heavy curtains, curious about the view. Through the blurred glass she saw shadows shifting in the garden, orange light pulling around the lantern on the path. For a moment she thought she saw a figure moving just outside the lantern's glow. Her breath caught, but when she blinked, the garden was empty. When the midnight hour passed, the storm had settled into a low hush. Evelyn lay awake under the patchwork quilt, listening to the house settling around her. The grandfather clock struck one with a lonely chime, and Jonathan beside her finally slipped into a deep sleep. Evelyn stared at the ceiling, tracing the pattern of water stains in the weak candlelight. Suddenly, a soft knocking came from the door. Knock. Knock. Her heart seized in her chest. Gathering courage, Evelyn called softly, "Jonathan? Is that you?" Suddenly the door swung open with a raspy screech. On the threshold stood Jonathan, disheveled, hair mussed, face pale. Evelyn's skin prickled, something about him felt wrong. "Jonathan," she whispered, voice trembling, "what are you doing up?" He stepped fully into the room, but his gaze remained vacant. Jonathan closed the door behind him and leaned against it, breathing heavily. I went out for a smoke," he mumbled, though it was impossible. There was no balcony, and he had been inside moments ago. Evelyn's eyes widened. The realization froze her. "We have no balcony," she said quietly. He said nothing, only stared at the floorboards. In that silence, Evelyn noticed the antique radio on the bedside table sputter to life with static. A distant piano melody floated through the silence. Evelyn moved toward the radio, heart pounding. The song changed mid-note to a distant lullaby she half remembered from childhood. Goosebumps prickled her arms as Jonathan remained motionless in the dim light. Then as suddenly as it started, the melody stuttered and died. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Evelyn's mind screamed something was terribly wrong. The hair on her neck stood on end. Tears blurred her vision as she struggled to speak. "Jonathan, What is happening? She asked, voice shaking. He looked at her, confusion in his eyes. He hesitated, then murmured, I'm sorry, Evelyn. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled newspaper clipping. Evelyn's fingers trembled as he placed it gently in her hand. The headline sent a jolt through her, tourist couple killed in crash outside Ravenwood. The date was last summer, and the photo, though grainy, was unmistakable. It was them. They lay side by side, pale and bloodless. Evelyn stared, the words swimming before her eyes. We died, she whispered, voice shaking. The paper slipped from her fingers. Jonathan closed his eyes. Yes, he said softly. I remember the rain, the bend in the road, the crash. You were calling my name in the ambulance hallway. His voice cracked. They said we didn't make it. Evelyn felt as if the floor had fallen away. Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. So, none of this is real? She asked, voice barely audible. Jonathan nodded slowly, grief in every movement. It seems we never checked out, he said. Evelyn looked around at the antique furnishings, the locked door, their scattered belongings. I don't understand, she said. If we're dead, how are we here? Jonathan gave a sad smile and gently took her hand. It felt cold. I don't know, he said softly. Maybe this is where we belong now, together. At least we're together. The candle flickered one last time. Far in the corridor, the echo of a lullaby drifted through the walls. Evelyn closed her eyes as it played, and at last the door to room 13 closed softly behind them, leaving only the hush and dust of the past.